Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Hey, now hold on. That is my line.
I had to get in there first this time. Keep you on your toes.
Oh, I see how it is. Well, to all our Sip&Talkers out there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, welcome back.
Welcome back. It's time for our look at global news, finance, and everything in between.
And there is a lot to get through today. I feel like my brain has been running on overtime just keeping up this week.
You and me both. The pace of these stories lately has been intense.
It really has. I think I was dreaming about geopolitical strategy last night. Yeah. But no rest for the wicked. We are not slowing down today.
Definitely not.
We're going to walk you through all the latest updates on finance, technology, and some critical global flashpoints.
And then, for the main event, we're going to dive deep into two really complex cases. First, the conviction of Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong.
And we're going to compare and contrast that with the corruption case against Wenjia in Taiwan. A lot of people are using the same phrase for both political persecution.
So our mission today is to just lay out the facts nice and clear so you can see the arguments on all sides and really make up your own mind.
Let's do it. Let's get started.
All right, first up, let's take a look at the U.S. domestic political scene. It's presenting what I've been thinking of as the paradox of performance.
That's a good way to put it, because on one hand, you have some genuinely positive indicators.
Right. Our sources are confirming you've got strong economic growth, asset prices are at record highs, and there's been, real measurable progress on reducing illegal immigration.
All things that an administration would normally be shouting from the rooftops.
Exactly. But the administration's approval rating has actually slid. A lot. It's dropped 9 points from 51% down to 42% just since early November.
And that velocity, the speed of that drop is what's so fascinating because it's happening at the exact moment when traditional metrics say things are going well.
So what's the disconnect?
Well, when you drill down into the data, it really boils down to one single, very visceral issue for people: inflation. For the average voter, gains in their 401k or stock portfolio feel kind of abstract.
Right. It's just a number on a screen.
Exactly. But that immediate painful hit to your wallet every time you go to the grocery store or fill up the car with gas, that creates a very real, very immediate economic anxiety.
It's that classic political timing problem, isn't it? You can implement these big, long-term economic policies, which might be the right thing to do.
But they require patience, and voters, especially right before a midterm election cycle, have absolutely zero patience.
You can announce, these huge multi-billion-dollar deals to bring manufacturing back or massive investments in new AI facilities.
But the payoff for that, the new jobs, the increased security, that's not going to be felt by the average person for, 2 or 3 years?
Long after the votes have been counted.
And that connects directly to the bigger picture here. What we're watching is a very, very finely calculated defensive strategy starting to unfold from the White House.
Because history is just brutal on this point.
It's brutal. The party that controls the White House almost always loses seats in the House during the midterms. The pressure is on.
And the predictions right now?
The current predictions suggest the Democrats have about a 77% chance of taking control of the House in 2026. So the administration is being forced into these immediate, high-impact policy moves.
So if those long-term policies aren't going to save them by the election, what are the short-term tools? What financial incentives are they using right now to try and cool down some of that voter anger?
We've seen 3 big ones being rolled out at the same time. First, there's this massive $12 billion agricultural subsidy plan.
Okay, so that's a direct cash injection.
It's a direct financial intervention, and it's designed to lock down the farming community. That's a critical voting bloc, but one that's been feeling really alienated lately.
They've been squeezed by commodity prices and the tariff situation, for sure.
So this isn't just aid. You have to see it as political stabilization.
And the second tool, I'm guessing, is the one that gets all the headlines.
The tax cuts. Force.
Precisely. The administration is pushing for a really large-scale tax cut and rebate package. The way it's structured, the average person could get a rebate of, I think, around $1,000.
And the political selling point. How are they funding this?
And that's the key part of the message. They plan to use the massive revenue they've collected from tariffs on foreign goods to pay for these domestic tax cuts.
Okay, hold on. I have to challenge that a bit. That sounds like a bit of a political sleight of hand.
How so?
Well, a tariff is basically a tax on imports, right? And most economists would argue that cost just gets passed on to the American consumer. It drives up inflation.
That's the argument, yes.
So isn't the government just taxing consumers with one hand through tariffs, then giving a little piece of it back with the other hand as a $1,000 rebate and calling it a win?
That is the core economic debate, and you've hit the paradox right on the head.
It feels like the short-term cash is designed to distract from the long-term cost. And that's because the policy choice isn't really about long-term economic efficiency. It's about immediate electoral visibility.
$1,000 in your bank account is very visible.
It's tangible. It's a highly publicized event that lands just weeks before an election. The slow, cumulative cost of those tariffs is much harder for the average person to calculate or to blame directly on a specific policy.
Which brings us to the third point. How are they managing inflation itself? Because tariffs are, by definition, inflationary. It's a tightrope.
They're trying to walk that tightrope by attempting a moderate, very strategic reversal of specific agricultural tariffs.
So just in certain sectors to bring down prices on specific goods.
Right, to cool things down quickly in the grocery aisle. But here's where it gets complicated. At the same time, the president is emphasizing that tariffs are still his main negotiating chip.
Non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. He's arguing they are absolutely essential for securing those critical high-value investments we were talking about.
The AI data centers, the semiconductor chip plants.
Exactly, to stop them from going overseas. So it's this really complex dance of policy. It's a 4-year cycle of politics clashing with, the decade-long industrial planning that we see coming out of a place like Beijing.
Let's shift gears from policy to enforcement. We've seen some very aggressive moves on immigration recently.
The actions have been pretty unprecedented in their scope, and they're highly regulatory.
What's the biggest example?
Look at the Department of Transportation. They've rolled out this new, very stringent English proficiency test for all commercial truck drivers.
And the results?
The immediate consequence has been staggering. 9,500 commercial truck drivers have been ordered to stop driving immediately because they failed the test.
Wow. 9,500 professional drivers just taken off the road.
Yeah.
That sends a very clear political message about enforcement.
It does, but it also creates huge ripples in the supply chain.
I can imagine. And how are they enforcing this at the state level?
It's pretty coercive, actually. The federal government is threatening to freeze tens of millions of dollars in state safety subsidies if the states don't comply immediately.
So pull the licenses of those who failed or lose your funding.
Exactly. It's a powerful top-down use of financial leverage to enforce federal policy.
And what about actual deportation numbers? The figures being reported are huge.
They are genuinely staggering. According to the latest Homeland Security data, in just the last 10 months, 2.5 million undocumented immigrants have left the U.S.
2.5 million. How does that break down?
About 600,000 were formally deported through federal action, but an incredible 1.9 million have self-deported.
Meaning they left on their own, likely because of the increased pressure.
That seems to be the logical conclusion, and there's one more financial penalty being added.
What's that?
The administration is planning to impose a $500 fee on apprehended illegal immigrants, specifically to make them pay for their own return flights.
So that's the final lever. Financial, logistical, regulatory. They're using everything to address that voter anxiety before the midterms.
Which runs headlong into probably the most intense geopolitical competition of our time.
The Great Chip Race.
The Great Chip Race. And when you look at China's ambition here, it really puts those short-term U.S. political moves into perspective.
We've talked about their subsidies before, but what's the latest number?
Well, China is getting ready to mobilize a huge new national incentive plan. They're looking at injecting potentially another $70 billion into their domestic semiconductor industry.
$70 billion, on top of what they've already committed.
Right. If this goes through, combined with the existing funds, China would become the world's largest chip subsidizer. They'd be pouring a total of $142 billion into this sector.
$142 billion. That is an almost incomprehensible amount of money dedicated to one goal.
And that goal is explicitly de-Americanization.
Total self-sufficiency.
Total. They're not just looking at the current generation of chips. They are focused on the entire supply chain, from the lithography machines to the advanced packaging. This is the long game.
A 10 or 20-year industrial plan.
Aiming to make their entire technology ecosystem fully independent of any Western components or IP. An investment like that, it fundamentally changes the entire global market.
But all of this, This massive technological ambition, the AI, the data centers, the chip fabs, it all runs into a very hard, very physical wall.
The data center power crunch.
You can't run a gigawatt data center on goodwill.
This is where Moore's law, the idea that computing power just keeps getting better and better, smashes into the reality of physics and infrastructure.
The grid just wasn't built for this.
Not at all. Data center construction is facing severe structural power shortages all over the world. In some high-demand areas, like around tech hubs in New York, there's a queue?
A queue for power.
A queue for power. There are 200 gigawatts of power demand just sitting there waiting for connection permit.
200. And what's the available supply?
The available supply capacity for new projects is only about 50 gigawatts.
That is a 4-to-1 deficit. That's a crisis.
It is. The grid wasn't built for this kind of sudden, highly concentrated energy demand that's being driven by AI.
So how are the utility companies handling it? Who gets to the front of the line?
Well, they're basically putting up policies that restrict access to only the biggest, most well-funded developers.
Gatekeeping.
Exactly. A company like National Grid in New York, their power demand has tripled in the last year, mostly from data centers. So now they're demanding huge prepaid deposits.
How much are we talking about?
We're talking about developers having to put up $1 million per megawatt hour, prepaid, just to secure a long-term power supply for their facility.
$1 million per megawatt hour up front, just to hold your spot. That's designed to lock out anyone except the absolute giants, Amazon, Microsoft, the big chip makers.
It's absolutely a gatekeeper fee. You should think of it less like a security deposit and more like trying to reserve a super popular multi-million-dollar wedding venue 5 years in advance.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And the venue, knowing the demand is through the roof, they ask you to prepay for the entire catering bill and maybe the new air conditioning system right now just to hold the date.
It guarantees their infrastructure costs are covered, and it weeds out anyone who isn't 100% committed and liquid.
It completely transforms the chip and AI race. It's not just a tech contest anymore. It's a massive, high-stakes, capital-intensive infrastructure race.
If you can't buy the power, your AI dreams die before you even break ground.
The physical grid is now the #1 constraint on technological expansion.
Okay, let's move from that technological competition to actual physical global conflict.
Yeah.
We saw a little flicker of hope out of the Ukraine peace talks in Berlin.
A flicker, yes. There was definitely a coordinated push. U.S. and Ukrainian envoys came out saying they'd reached consensus on about 90% of the peripheral issues.
Which sounds incredibly promising.
On the surface, it does. It suggests there's a path toward at least a preliminary framework.
So what are the actual tangible concessions that are driving that optimism? What is QF putting on the table?
The big one, the headline grabber, is that President Zelensky is reportedly willing to drop the long-term goal of joining NATO.
Wow, okay, that is huge. For Moscow, that's always been the absolute red line.
It's been the central, non-negotiable sticking point. So by taking that off the table, Ukraine is offering a real path to de-escalation.
But that is a massive strategic sacrifice. What are they asking for in return?
In exchange, Ukraine is demanding strong security guarantees from key Western allies, specifically the U.S. and European partners.
And this isn't just a vague promise.
No. They want assurances that are designed to mimic NATO's Article V, the Collective Defense Guarantee.
Let's just quickly explain Article V for anyone who might not know.
Article V is the heart of NATO. It says an attack on one member is an attack on all members. So if the U.S. and Europe give Ukraine Article V-like guarantees, they would be bound by treaty to step in with military force or massive aid if Russia were to attack again.
It's basically a world-class insurance policy without the formal NATO membership.
Precisely. And that's being pushed hard by the U.S. envoys, who are trying to sweeten the pot with a post-conflict prosperity plan for reconstruction.
And the money for that is coming from?
The EU is moving ahead with plans to use the $300 billion in frozen Russian central bank assets to provide the loans for Ukrainian reconstruction. It's a huge financial carrot.
But here we get to the central problem, the last 10%. Russia remains completely unyielding on territory.
Absolutely unyielding. Moscow is refusing to concede any territory, specifically Donbas and Crimea.
And they're dismissing the whole proposal.
They publicly called it an attempt to prolong the war. They're refusing to even discuss a ceasefire unless their territorial demands are met first. A Kremlin official just reiterated that Ukraine will never get Crimea back under any circumstances.
So we're at a profound stalemate. You've got hope on one side, driven by these big economic incentives and strategic compromise,
and a hardline refusal to budge on territory on the other. It seems a preliminary framework might be possible, but real peace requires a Russian compromise that just isn't there.
The world is basically looking at two completely different, mutually exclusive maps.
And beyond Ukraine, we're seeing escalations elsewhere that just show how volatile the whole world is right now.
For sure. In the Black Sea, Ukraine showed off a whole new level of tech capability.
They did. They claimed the first ever use of underwater drones against Russian submarines docked at the port of Novorossiysk.
Russia denied any damage, of course.
Of course. But the deployment itself, the ability to do that, shows the conflict is just getting more and more sophisticated.
And the Middle East continues to be a major point of concern.
Absolutely. We saw Israel approve 19 new settlements in the West Bank, which is the largest expansion in a long time. That drew immediate international condemnation.
At the same time, the International Criminal Court is pushing forward.
They rejected Israel's request to stop the ongoing Gaza investigation, keeping that judicial pressure on. And to top it all off, the U.S. has explicitly vowed to retaliate for the American service members who were killed in a recent strike in Syria.
So while one conflict is searching for an off-ramp, the rest of the global environment is still incredibly hot.
And that need for control, whether it's over chips and power or over conflict outcomes, that leads us directly into our main event today.
The demand for political and informational control, as seen through the cases of Jimmy Lai and Ko Wen-je.
Right. Now we pivot to the subject that I think requires the most careful, impartial, fact-based analysis we can offer.
The conviction of Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong. This is, without a doubt, one of the most high-profile and controversial political cases in the world right now.
Let's start with just the cold, hard facts, the legal outcome and the law that was used to deliver it.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The central fact is this. On December 15th, 2025, Jimmy Lai, the 78-year-old founder of the pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily, was convicted.
On all charges.
On all three charges brought against him under the National Security Law, or the NSL. And this was not a short trial. It lasted 156 days. The final judgment document was 855 pages long.
And this trial was a legal first for Hong Kong, wasn't it?
It was. It's Hong Kong's first full trial on the very specific, very politicized charge of collusion with foreign forces. So the stakes here aren't just symbolic. They are, for the defendant, existential.
What were the specific counts he was convicted of, and what kind of penalty is he facing?
He was found guilty on 2 counts of conspiracy to collude with foreign or external forces to endanger national security.
And a third.
1 count of conspiracy to publish seditious publications.
And those charges,
yeah,
they carry a very heavy shadow.
They do. The maximum penalty under the national security law is life in prison. His sentencing is scheduled for January 12th, 2026.
And we have to remember, he's already serving another sentence.
A crucial point. Whatever sentence he gets for this will be added on top of the 5-year, 9-month sentence he's already serving for a separate, seemingly minor fraud charge that had to do with the office lease for the newspaper.
So his legal future looks exceptionally bleak.
It does. Now, let's detail the evidence the prosecution used as laid out in that huge judgment. What exactly did the court decide constituted collusion?
What was the specific act?
The court's finding focused on Lai's actions after the huge pro-democracy protests in 2019. The prosecution argued, and the court agreed, that he used the powerful platform of Apple Daily,
his newspaper, his social media, his international network,
all of it, to directly ask foreign governments, including the United States, to impose sanctions on specific Chinese and Hong Kong officials.
So this wasn't just vague criticism. The act of collusion was defined as actively soliciting official government punishment, like travel bans or asset freezes, against named individuals.
Exactly, against figures like the former chief executive Carrie Lam and the current one, John Lee. The evidence they cited included communication records, internal editorial memos, and published articles that were clearly advocating for sanctions.
And his collaboration with advocacy groups was also part of it.
Right, groups like Stand with Hong Kong, which lobbied foreign parliaments. The court decided these actions were intended to weaken the government's legitimacy and were a direct threat to national security.
And what did the court say about his defense?
They were particularly harsh. They rejected his testimony completely, calling it self-contradictory and untrustworthy.
Before we get to the persecution arguments, we have to talk about the human cost of this whole process.
This detail it's paramount to understanding the gravity of this case. Jimmy Lai has been held in solitary confinement since December of 2020.
That's over 5 years.
It's well over 1,800 consecutive days in isolation. And at 78 years old, he's suffering from serious health issues, diabetes, heart problems. He's lost a lot of weight.
So there's a real fear among his supporters that he could die in prison.
A very palpable fear. The process itself has been maximally punitive, regardless of the final sentence.
Okay, so that brings us to the counter-narrative. The international community and his supporters have almost universally called this political persecution. Let's break down the logic behind that claim.
There are three main pillars to that argument. The first one is about retroactive justice and political motivation.
Explain that.
Critics argue that the national security law, which was passed in mid-2020, was primarily used to prosecute acts like advocating for sanctions that happened in 2019.
Before the law even existed.
Before the law existed. So the complaint is that this isn't a normal application of law. It's using a new law as a political tool to retroactively punish prior political dissent.
It's a political decision that overrides the traditional legal principle that you can't be punished for something that wasn't illegal when you did it.
Exactly. And the consequences were immediate. The moment the charges were brought, the assets of Apple Daily were frozen under the NSL. That forced it to shut down immediately.
So the argument is that this wasn't just about punishing Lai, but about completely silencing the single biggest pro-democracy media outlet.
Right, which led to this precipitous collapse in Hong Kong's press freedom ranking.
The second pillar of the argument is the widespread international condemnation.
The global response from Western powers was pretty much unified and very forceful. The UK Foreign Secretary called it a politically motivated prosecution. The US and the EU both called for his immediate release.
This consensus really frames the case as one of political oppression.
It does, but there was also a lot of criticism that the condemnation didn't have any real teeth. I remember people sarcastically calling the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention the subtitle team.
The subtitle team.
Yeah, because critics felt that while the UN issued this high-profile condemnation, there was no concrete action, no enforcement mechanism to actually compel Hong Kong or Beijing to do anything.
So the international pressure was basically symbolic.
It highlighted the limits of global human rights pressure when it comes up against a sovereign national security framework.
And the third and final logic.
The subjectivity of the evidence itself. The defense argued that everything Lai did was standard press freedom, reporting on protests, talking to international figures, publishing strong editorials.
But the prosecution relied on the objective seditiousness of the articles,
which critics say allows the state to just pull isolated phrases and tweets out of the broader political context of what was happening in 2019.
And that leads to that powerful phrase his supporters use, mo suyu.
Mo suyu. Guilty of nothing specific. It implies that charges are basically concocted based on these really subjective, vague interpretations of intent, rather than a clear violation of a law that was standing at the time.
It suggests you're guilty simply for being the person you are.
And this is where we can connect it back to our earlier discussion about the tech war. From Beijing's perspective, this case is fundamentally about extreme information control.
In this era of intense geopolitical competition,
any channel, especially a high-profile media leader that directly connects domestic dissent to Washington or London, is not seen as journalism. It's seen as a critical national security vulnerability that has to be eliminated.
The connection itself becomes the crime.
The connection is the threat.
Yeah.
And to put it in a simple analogy, in the U.S., if you go on Twitter, publish editorials, and lobby Congress to sanction the president, that's protected free speech.
You're using the system to challenge the system.
Right. But under the NSL framework, that exact same action publishing editorials and asking for outside help is officially defined as colluding with foreign forces to endanger national security. It's a terrifying divergence in what political speech even means.
Okay, so let's take that concept, judicial action targeting a political opponent, and apply it to a completely different legal and political system.
To Taiwan and the case of opposition leader Ko Wen-jo.
And we have to give this the same rigorous, objective look because the charges are totally different.
They're totally different. In Hong Kong, it's national security. Here, it's financial corruption. And yet, the public perception of persecution is just as central to the story.
So who is the target here?
The target is Ko Wen-je. He's the former mayor of Taipei and the former chairman of the Taiwan People's Party, or TPP.
Which is a significant political force.
A very significant rising force. He got 26% of the vote in the 2024 presidential election. He is, simply put, the most powerful opposition figure outside of the two main establishment parties.
And the charges against him are serious financial crimes.
Very serious. Corruption and bribery related to something called the Jingmen City Floor Area Ratio case, and also charges of embezzling political donations.
And what kind of sentence were the prosecutors asking for?
This is what really stood out. They sought a truly staggering prison sentence of 28 years and 6 months.
28 years. That's clearly designed to send a message.
It's designed to permanently end his political career.
And what's his current status? He was detained for a while, right?
He was. It was a whole procedural back and forth. He was indicted in December 2024, initially released, then redetained after a higher court appeal. He was in continuous detention for 113 days.
And that lengthy detention became a huge part of the persecution narrative.
A central part. He was eventually released in September 2025 on bail of 70 million new Taiwan dollars, which is about 2.1 million US dollars. And he has to wear an electronic ankle monitor.
Okay, let's break down the core corruption claim. The floor area ratio, or FAR. We need to explain what that is for our listeners.
Right. The FAR is a key zoning rule. It's the ratio of a building's total floor space to the size of the piece of land it's on.
So it basically dictates how big and tall a building can be.
Exactly. And if the government raises the FAR for a specific property, they are instantly increasing the potential profit for the developer, often by billions of dollars.
So the claim is that while Ko was mayor, the FAR for this Jingwei City project was massively raised from 560% to 840%.
A huge jump, allegedly resulting in billions in illegal profit for the builder.
And the prosecution's claim is that he was bribed to make this happen.
That's the claim. That he received $2.1 million funneled through straw donors, plus another $15 million in cash.
What's their evidence for that?
They're citing testimonies from key figures, communication records, and the timing of a large cash handover that supposedly happened right after a groundbreaking ceremony for the project. The prosecutors claim he knowingly violated the law.
And what's Ko's defense?
He has firmly denied any direct knowledge of any bribes. His defense says the FIR adjustment was totally legal, done under normal urban renewal regulations. They say the evidence is weak and that there's no direct proof connecting that cash to him.
So it relies on inference and testimony.
Heavily. Which brings us right back to the political persecution argument, just like in the Lai case.
Logic number one seems to be all about the timing.
The timing is the strongest part of their argument. The whole investigation blew up right after the 2024 election.
Precisely when his party, the TPP, had gained this critical balance of power influence in the legislature.
So critics immediately framed it as the ruling party, the DPP, using the judiciary to cleanse and weaken its main rising opposition. Not a pursuit of justice, but a political hit job.
And public opinion seems to reflect that skepticism.
It really does. A major poll showed that 41.7% of the Taiwanese public believed he was facing political persecution. That's a huge number. It shows deep public doubt about judicial impartiality in these cases.
The second logic is about procedural overreach, the harshness of the process itself.
The process was undeniably heavy-handed. That back-and-forth detention for 113 days, the huge $2.1 million bail, the massive sentence they requested.
His supporters see all of that as an abuse of power.
Right. They use a phrase that translates to detaining people to force testimony. The idea is that the process itself is the punishment. It's designed to financially exhaust and psychologically break the defendant.
And the third logic, again, just like the Lai case, is about the weakness of the evidence.
The bribery charges rely on common intent and inference, not a smoking gun. The donation case is looking back at old, complex funding from 2021.
So supporters call it fabricating charges, inventing a crime after the fact to destroy a political opponent.
That's the argument. The lack of a direct paper trail is, to them, proof of political motivation.
You know, it presents this fascinating dilemma. I often use this analogy from the corporate world.
Go on.
Let's say a powerful CEO claims he had no idea his senior secretary was running a complex kickback scheme with a supplier, even if he genuinely didn't know about the cash-changing hands.
But his signature's on all the final contracts.
His signature's on the final contracts, the permits, the authorizations. Legally, the responsibility often still rests with the person at the top, regardless of what they claim they knew.
That's a perfect analogy for the defense's challenge here. While the process in Taiwan might feel heavy-handed and politically timed, the legal system still requires them to disprove the prosecutor's chain of evidence connecting the policy change to the funding.
The legal case stands on its own, but the political impact is instantaneous.
And severe. Which brings us to the core synthesis. We have two very different cases, national security versus financial corruption. But the narrative of political persecution is powerful in both. Why?
Let's put them side by side. The anatomy of a political case.
First, look at their shared status. Both Lai and Ko were the primary, most influential threat to the incumbent power structure.
Lai was the media titan opposing Beijing's control. Ko was the leader of the rising third party threatening the DPP's dominance, and in both cases, the judicial action worked. It immediately curtailed their influence.
Lai's media empire was destroyed. Ko's political momentum was severely damaged. The legal system became a very effective political weapon.
And next, the subjectivity of guilt. This seems to be a hallmark of these kinds of cases. Both relied heavily on interpreting intent, not just on hard evidence.
In Lai's case, guilt was inferred from interpreting articles and tweets as colluding. The intent to harm national security was entirely subjective, derived from his commentary.
The crime was the idea.
And in Ko's case, guilt hinged on inferring criminal intent, linking meetings and donations to a policy change. The connection is subjective, based on testimony and timing, not a ledger. In both places, the opposition feels ambiguity was weaponized.
Now, what about the procedural harshness? It seems like that was used as a tool to intimidate their supporters.
The difference in severity really reflects the nature of the two regimes. For Lai, under the NSL, the harshness was absolute. Solitary confinement for over 5 years, no bail, severe health issues.
It's a total constraint.
For Kosas in Taiwan, the harshness was intense pressure. 113 days of detention, the massive bail, the ankle monitor. But the message to all political opponents is the same. Opposition comes at a devastating personal and financial cost.
And finally, timing is everything.
It's always the tell. Lai was arrested just 42 days after the NSL was passed. It was a foundational move to establish the absolute authority of that new law.
And Ko's investigation ramped up immediately after the election, seen as a retaliatory strike to kneecap him before the next cycle.
So if you synthesize all of this, what's the underlying claim in both of these very different cases?
It's the perceived loss of judicial independence.
That's the core of it. Whether it's Hong Kong's system, which prioritizes national security, or Taiwan's high-intensity prosecution, the argument is that the judiciary is being used as a political tool to clear the field.
But the mechanisms and the outcomes are still very different.
They diverge significantly. In Hong Kong, the system is explicitly subservient to maintaining national sovereignty. The law requires judges to prioritize state security over traditional liberties.
Which leads to life sentences and years of solitary with very little chance of a meaningful appeal. It's a structurally constrained system.
Right. In Taiwan, despite all the intense pressure on Kaki, he was eventually released. He still has viable appeal options. And the fact that over 40% of the public questions the fairness of it shows there's a domestic buffer.
An active, critical public that limits how far the ruling party can push without losing its own legitimacy.
It's the difference between a system where political pressure is the law versus a system where political pressure is actively stressing and challenging the independence of the law.
To put it one last way.
Yeah.
In Hong Kong, the charge is, did you publicly organize friends to criticize the government?
And in Taiwan, the charge is, did you secretly profit by using your position to raise land values?
But for the powerful opposition figure, the immediate result is the same. Constrained freedom, immense pressure, and public humiliation, all based on rules set by the ruling power.
It's a powerful lesson. The system, no matter what it is, finds a way to remove the threat.
So, to all our listeners, our goal today was just to provide you with the objective facts on both the Lai and Ko cases. The charges, the evidence, the procedures.
We're not here to prove who's right or wrong, but to equip you with the full spectrum so you can think through it yourself.
These cases are so complex because they hit on that fundamental tension between law and order on one side and freedom of expression on the other.
Where one society sees legitimate state protection, another sees political weaponization.
And that leads us to our final, provocative thought for you to think about. In this era of extreme geopolitical competition and information warfare, we have to ask a really difficult question.
Which is?
Does any sovereign nation truly allow a free press when that press is actively encouraging international sanctions against the state's own leadership?
That is the core global tension that the Lai case raises, and it forces everyone to reevaluate where that line is drawn between protected journalism and active, foreign-supported political opposition.
And on that note, we've noticed in the comments lately,
well,
some are just pure complaints.
Right, and we really, really encourage all of you, if you're going to engage, please engage with the logic and the points we actually discussed here today.
Exactly. Let's have a real exchange of views. It is not about proving who is right or who is wrong.
It's about making sure the discussion has multiple angles, that it's comprehensive, breaking out of that information echo chamber. That's the critical thinking we're aiming for.
And as always, for all of these events and all this data, please consult different authoritative sources. Don't just rely on a single narrative.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Sip and Talk. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show. And also check out our old friend Liki's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life, for some fun travel vlogs and memes.
We will catch you next time.